Hello, my name is Anthony Patch, and this is another edition of Pulse. Today is the 16th of September of 2025, and as I am reporting today, there is a flotilla en route to Gaza. This is known as the Samud, or S-U-M-U-D, Samud Flotilla. And there are some 40 countries that are represented by various small and medium-sized vessels, sailboats and powerboats that are heading to Gaza both as a symbol and a call for peace, but also to deliver humanitarian aid. It is to be seen what the response will be by Israel as the flotilla arrives in the proximity of the Palestinian territory along the Gaza Strip. This is a tipping point, as I view it, with respect to how the greater global community views Israel as a state, as a nation state. Obviously, many of you have been following the events that have occurred in the bombing in Qatar, the continual genocide that's taking place in Gaza, as well as in the West Bank of Israel itself. This is a tipping point for Israel because so many nations are gathered against Israel politically, and many are calling for a peacekeeping force, and in particular, Mahmoud Abbas, the not elected, but the previous president of the Palestinian people, who still remains as their recognized and internationally recognized leader, even though his term of office has expired and there have not been free elections held, pardon me, in Palestine because of what's been going on. But he's calling for a petition for peace to be presented to the UN. And you'll recall that back in July and August of this year, he attempted to meet with the UN General Assembly in New York, but his visa was denied by the US State Department. He had at that time petitioned verbally for the relocation of the meeting of the UN General Assembly to Geneva, but that was not formally accomplished. There are other meetings that have been taking place, humanitarian meeting that has been taking place in Geneva itself. And I just want to read a quick article regarding that. United Nations Human Rights Council is holding their 60th regular session in Geneva from September 8th, today's the 16th, until October 8th. And this is where Mahmoud Abbas is calling for not only a petition for peace, but calling for a peacekeeping force, specifically for Gaza, but I would imagine this would extend to the West Bank as well, because of the aggressive move by Israel to, again, authorize the establishment of settlements within the West Bank. So what I'm anticipating is that the UN may actually, in what I am considering to be a tipping point geopolitically, that the UN may finally gather together because of the global focus on the genocide that has been occurring since October 7th, and really before that in the Gaza Strip, that finally the UN may gather enough supporters against Israel with respect to gaining peace, to bring humanitarian aid, to bar the IDF from Gaza, and ensure peace for the Palestinian people in that location and prevent their relocation, their displacement, as well as the continued death and violence that's been occurring there. So What I'm hoping for and what I'm praying for is that, in fact, the UN, in other words, the global community, will listen to this petition for peace from Mahmoud Abbas and to others that are calling for a UN peacekeeping force. There has been discussion of troops from China and Russia participating in this. And I think at this point, many countries around the world, especially countries that are within the BRICS organization, would certainly, and perhaps to an extent from Asia, the participation of a variety of countries with small representations from each country, but nonetheless a significant enough grouping of international troops and forces by the UN. This would force Israel to withdraw and to cease any more aggressive actions against the Palestinians. Now, here in the United States, there has been, of course, the tragic killing, the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and that has really gathered the world's attention. But this is also attention that is being cast upon Israel. Now, I'm not going to elaborate on that because still this is very early in the investigation into the killing of Charlie Kirk, but it needs to be borne in mind that there is some attention being cast in the direction of Netanyahu, the IDF, and Mossad with regard to the killing of this individual. So, again, adding to the concept, the perception of a tipping point for Israel. Now, there is, biblically speaking, in Zechariah 12:3, Scripture describes Israel as becoming a burdensome stone for the world. Now, that's subject to interpretation, and I won't elaborate on that. I will cover that tonight in my live stream that my wife and I present 3 times a week. We present live streams on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday evenings for anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. We've been doing this since 2018. We have about 1,000 live streams in the archives. If you'd like more information, go to anthonypatch.com and you can join us for these live streams. But tonight we'll be talking about our interpretation and our breakdown of Israel as a burdensome stone for the whole world. So this is not so much a political statement or analysis in opposition to Israel as a nation, because Israel really is not the physical location of the state of Israel, the Zionist state of Israel, as Israel is a people. These are the 12 original tribes of Israel that have been scattered throughout the world. That's true Israel. And I won't go into a lot of that here because this is more of a secular geopolitical briefing that I'm providing here by way of pulse. But I wanted to highlight that what I really think is bringing this to a crescendo is not only the profound humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but now there is a gathering of sorts. 40 different nations are represented in this flotilla. This is called the Global Samud Flotilla. This is really bringing focus, even by the mainstream media, focus upon the plight of the Palestinians and the actions of Israel against the Palestinians, such that it is requiring a grassroots civilian movement of people bringing aid to the Palestinians, when really the UN has been completely ineffective in ceasing the genocide and bringing the much needed aid and the starvation that's been occurring in Gaza. Where is the UN? What's the purpose of the UN? Why meet and talk all the time if there's no action? It's an awful lot of talking that goes on there, but very little that ever comes out of there. that's really of any consequence to improving the lives of people. So I think this may be a call to action to the UN to put up or shut up. That's the way I would put it. Put up or shut up. I think the UN recognizes that this is their call to action. And when we say the UN, we need to bear in mind that these are individual countries. And so we have individual countries, especially in the Middle East, that are calling for definitive action. Now, the countries in the Middle East are relatively small, but Egypt is gathering its military forces. Of course, we have the issue with Iran, and Iran does not necessarily want to initiate a military strike against Israel, but they understand that they are subject to the aggressive moves by Israel. That hasn't gone away. So if we look at Egypt and Iran as being principal players in the Middle East to provide humanitarian aid by way of a peacekeeping force, they may be the first two to step up to the plate. Of course, we need to see other countries, and I, again, would welcome Russia and China's involvement, and India. And really, we can think of this as a BRICS call to action as well as a UN call to action. So on the topic of BRICS, I've mentioned this many times in terms of the United States and BRICS, Donald Trump and BRICS. I still hold to my expectation that at some point in the very near future, President Trump is going to announce that the United States is joining BRICS and may in fact have always been by way of the testing of the US cryptocurrency from the Federal Reserve, having been a de facto member of BRICS by way of cryptocurrency testing that has been going on for 4 years. So this may be a tipping point for President Trump to understand that his allies in Europe have turned their back on him, and politically, militarily, and financially, the current leaders in really what amounts to NATO, but in Western Europe in particular, politically, they're on shaky ground. That's saying that lightly. That they've turned their back on President Trump, turned their back on the United States. Thus, I think opening the door, setting the stage for the president to say, fine, we're going to join BRICS for financial reasons, but for peacekeeping reasons. One of the repercussions of the president bringing the United States into BRICS would be the facilitation of peace between the United States and Russia, which really means peace between Ukraine and Russia. In order to bring that to a close, BRICS and the joining of BRICS by the United States would bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And the comments in the last few days by President Trump with regard and with respect to the leaders in Europe and NATO at large is, you need to step up to the plate and provide 100% of the support to Ukraine. Otherwise, we're leaving. We're not going to support Ukraine anymore. Now it is up to Europe to take the lead. This is essentially heavily paraphrasing what the president has stipulated to Europe, that Europe needs to take the lead on this, and failing to do so, the United States will no longer provide support to Ukraine. So this is indicating already that the US is 2 steps out the door to ending support with Ukraine, which translates to the movement towards peace between the US and Russia and getting back to economic relations which begin with diplomatic relations. So this circles back to Gaza. This may be a tipping point in which there are participants from the United States in this flotilla. And if Israel proves to be aggressive, I mean this from a use of force, warning shots across the bow of ships, or even striking the hull of ships. These are small boats. And certainly, if any U.S. citizens are hurt, harmed, or even killed by Israel, I view that this will be the opportunity for President Trump to disavow any support of Israel coming from the United States. And I think really in the background, this is what the president has been seeking. Now, we understand that there are a great many Israeli influences over the president and our Congress and so forth. We understand all that backstory. But the president, I think, is looking for, and the people in his administration, and even those that are financially, apart from Israel, financially supporting this administration, and I mean from the tech sector and so forth, they're looking for a politically correct opportunity to separate the U.S. from Israel as a burdensome stone. And therefore, should Israel, the IDF, choose to literally fire upon, or even with ships, intercept the flotilla and establish a blockade against the flotilla in which there is force used. And of course, this would be cutting off humanitarian aid, the delivery of humanitarian aid, which even without the use of force is a form of force. That there would be such an outcry, and this is, I think, why there are more than 40 countries represented in this flotilla. There would be such a global outcry against a blockade and the use of force by Israel. This may be enough, and I mean politically, and the president is very big on what is known as optics in the media. The optics of Israel as the aggressor denying humanitarian aid perhaps would be a tipping point for the president, in which he can say, we are no longer supporting what Israel is doing with respect to the Palestinian people. Now, I know that's going out on a limb, but I've gone out on a limb with respect to what the president may say regarding BRICS and the United States. I think if we look at this critically, logically, we look at it with a clear mind, apart from the hype and the propaganda through the media and through the politicians, I think it only makes sense that the U.S. is ready to back away from Israel. And when I say Israel, again, I'm talking about the Zionist state of Israel. I'm not talking about the Israeli people themselves in physical Israel, as well as the original Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel that have been dispersed around the world. That's true Israel. And those are the people we should be supporting, true Israel. The Zionist state of Israel has proven to be nothing more than a group of thugs to their neighbors and to the world. The people of the United States are being divided. They're being divided due to a number of tipping points and a number of issues that have come up of late, but have been boiling up for many, many years. The president is looking for something that will unify. There is a division in the people of the United States with respect to the Palestinian and the Palestinian people and the plight of the Palestinians. But despite the media division that has been ginned up to politically divide people with regard to the Palestinians. I think what joins the American people, and I'm sure this is true with most people around the world, what joins most people is the humanitarian crisis that is going on. And people are crying out to their political leaders to solve the humanitarian crisis, to bring an end to it, to bring the food and medicine and shelter that is necessary, and to provide a Palestinian state to the Palestinian people, their own territory, their own sovereign state. This is what Mahmoud Abbas has been calling for. And if they can have free elections, they can elect who they want as their leader, apart from Hamas. And of course, Hamas as a military organization needs to be disbanded if there is truly to be peace. So there are two sides to this argument, this conflict. But I want to just leave you with this. Pay close attention today and the next few days to the flotilla, whether it is to be intercepted in international waters or along the coast of Israel, along the Gaza Strip, within Israeli-controlled waters, if it's to be intercepted, and what form of interception, if there is an interception, what form will that take? If it goes to the negative extreme, meaning shots are fired, people are hurt or even killed, I think that will be the tipping point for the world to say enough is enough. Bring in the peacekeeping forces by way of the UN, and finally the UN shutting up and putting up in the form of definitive action and ceasing the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, including the West Bank. Then I think that what we need to watch for are the statements coming out of President Trump's mouth with regard to Israel, that we may actually see the president cutting off support to Israel. And then the ripple effects, think of Israel and, once again, Iran. The ripple effect that would have with that potential conflict, and further extending the ripple effect out to the United States and its support of Ukraine. Then beyond that, there may be the announcement by President Trump that the U.S. is no longer going to continue this isolation, self-imposed isolation by way of sanctions that he's been calling for again with Europe to stop buying oil from Russia, and 100% sanctions against Russia by Europe. And then the United States will also impose 100% sanctions against Russia. All of that may go away with the announcement of the U.S. joining BRICS. These three steps solve a lot of problems. So let's watch the flotilla. Let's watch what Israel does. Let's see what happens with respect to Iran, because of the U.S. no longer supporting Israel. And then see what happens with respect to Ukraine, because the U.S. will no longer be supporting Ukraine, which of course affects NATO. And then what the effect will be with respect to BRICS and the U.S. and Russia. Dominoes. Each one of those. And in this sense, it's not so much dominoes falling, which tends to be a negative. We think about Vietnam, remember? Dominoes. This is actually the setting up of the dominoes. This is the standing up of each one of those game pieces on the game board. So I just want to bring this to a conclusion, but I wanted to just give you those dominoes to pay attention to and not to be distracted by what the media wants you to focus on. We encourage thinking independently, seeing the big picture, thinking critically, thinking logically. And this is reflected in our live streams, where we have the opportunity beyond the YouTube platform to speak a little more freely, a little more openly, and have the time to go into greater details. So please join us at anthonypatch.com if you'd like more. We welcome everyone to join with us in that conversation. Thank you and God bless.